There you go.
We are live with another restaurant expert roundup. We have Tobie Nidetz. We'll be back in a second. Tobie, well,
how are you?
Living the dream. How was it up north in beautiful Minnesota?
Yeah, well, today's a gorgeous day. Actually, we had all rain yesterday, but today it's that typical Minnesota summer. It's 75, 78 right now. It'll get down to about 45, 48 tonight. So you go from nice sunny day to needing a sweatshirt in the evening around a fire. It's beautiful.
It sounds like Kentucky. So we
Yeah.
have similar weathers. We get to see all four seasons. I was just out
Yeah.
in California last week for business, and I had some friends of mine say, "Man, I'd love to see all the seasons, but I don't know if I can leave 80 degrees and sunny all year round." And I had to tell them to get out of the car and walk somewhere.
Sure.
So introduce yourself to the audience. Tell them who you are, what you do.
Well, I'm a restaurant consultant, and I've been doing it for a lot of years. I'm not going to tell you how many, but was in the early 70s when I worked with Let Us Entertain You, creating that whole concept of casual dining.
Okay.
And have been working with restaurants all over the country since, actually. And started a podcast a couple of years ago called Restaurant Legends, where I talk to some of the people that I've worked with and some people that you may heard of. So,
yeah, you've got some amazing episodes on there. So I recommend everybody check out restaurantlegends.com so you can see a bunch of legends. One day we'll convince Tobie that I'm a legend in the restaurant world. Maybe give me about 5 or 6 more years and I'll be there.
A couple more years. Yeah.
More years. So what I want to talk about today, we've talked in the past, and I wanted to go into a couple topics and get your opinion because I've listened to the podcast. I've seen you online. And so these are a couple topics I think you're more than equipped to chime in on. And one of the questions I have is that we're going into the pandemic. A lot of restaurants realized when it hit, wow, my consumers don't know who I am. They don't know my story. There's a restaurant down the street from my house that I kind of cracked up because for 2 years before that, the guy struggled and never made a post on Facebook personally. It was never, you would have never known he owned the restaurant. And then when the pandemic hit, you would know every 5 minutes he owned the restaurant. So I think a lot of times restaurants don't do a good enough job of making their brand stand out. So talk about what you think there.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, people have discovered the social media effect, and it's due to the pandemic because they had no other way to advertise. Print is always too expensive and stupid, and radio and TV are just way out of line for most people. They rely on social media. And a lot of them kind of discovered how that worked, that it did very well for them if they did it right. If they didn't, they only got moderate results. But I know some people that have gotten so into it now that a day doesn't go by where you don't see something somewhere. What is an acronym? I think it's GIFT, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Yep.
If you got the gift and you do that every day, you're covered on all your social.
And it's amazing how simple it is. Like you've been around the restaurant business for a long time. I got into the marketing world in late 90s, 98, 99. And I remember my restaurant clients I had back then, it was radio, TV, direct mail, maybe the gorilla suit with a banner on the little thing on the sidewalk to get attention. But for the most part, everything you did to market your restaurant and, let's see, what is this, 2021, pre-2013, 12, it was paid.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Some of that guerrilla stuff was a lot of fun. Yeah. I had a restaurant in downtown Minneapolis that was not doing well for lunch. So I had 2 of my servers go out and chalk in footsteps from major buildings downtown to the restaurant. And it created a buzz. People want to know what the footsteps were for. So that kind of guerrilla marketing is fun. And you can probably do it on social media, but I haven't really figured out what that is yet.
Oh, I actually saw a restaurant that did something like you're talking about, but they did a scavenger hunt around the downtown area they were in. That is, people found the clues that led you to the restaurant. And it was fun because people are like, oh, I know where that's at. Too bad I'm at work. And then somebody said, oh, sucker, I'm not. I'm going by. I'm going to get that envelope. So grassroots is awesome. But what I love about it is you mentioned the gift. You mentioned all these different Google and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, LinkedIn. They're all free.
Yeah.
And give you an ability to have your conversation. But I think one thing I noticed that the pandemic really made me think about is that a lot of businesses look the same. And so you've got to do something to stand out. And a lot of times that's putting, as much as people don't like it, it's putting your face that's made for radio
Mm-hmm.
on a video camera and
Sure.
talking about your restaurant.
That's always helpful because restaurant is a social business. People want to know who's there. They want to know who the owner is and what kind of person he is. Uh, People love walking into a restaurant and saying, "Hey, I know the owner."
Yep.
And in the old days, that meant touching tables, where you walked around every day, every night, and talked to everybody that came into the restaurant. The old adage was that success is made one plate at a time, and that's still true. But now we can extend from touching tables to touching people through social media as well.
Yep. Love it. So the next part, I want to get your thought on this. And this is kind of my thought a little, but at the same time, I know there's obviously a post-pandemic hiring issue. There's a lot of things happen. People
Yeah.
left the industry. They went into a lot of back of house, went into the construction business, and eventually
Mm-hmm.
that's going to kind of come back. But one of the things I've been adamant on is I think a lot of businesses don't have a place that people want to work. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of restaurants, you haven't told your story. You haven't told how awesome it is, how badass your company is, how awesome of a boss you are. And that story is not online. Is part of the problem with hiring in the restaurant space that there's so much competition that restaurants just do not stand out as a brand that want to work at?
Well, that's true. Yeah, for the small independents, absolutely. And really, to be honest with you, in a lot of the small independents, they have bad cultures anyway.
Yeah.
For them, the reason people aren't working for them is because nobody likes to work for them.
Yeah.
They were working for them in the past because they were making some money there. But now, if they know they can go someplace else, make better money, be in a better culture, they're going to go. I know there's a lot of people who are doing hiring bonuses now, which that's okay. It's it brings some attention to what you're doing, but it really doesn't solve the problem. Solving the problem is getting a good restaurant, getting a good culture in your restaurant, where you talk to your employees, you listen to your employees become part of the family. There's a lot of older restaurants where servers and cooks have been around for 20 years. Well, that's because the owner brought them into the family and became part of the DNA of the restaurant, so to speak.
Yeah, I love it. I think that there's a lot of things you can do right and you can do wrong. I've been a boss since I was in my early 20s, and I've been a pretty shitty one a lot of times. When I got in my 30s and now I'm 45, I've come to respect and appreciate the concept of a team and
Mm-hmm.
listening,
Mm-hmm.
and not just having a meeting and saying, "Hey, give me 10 ideas," just to have lip service, but to say, "Okay, here was 10 ideas we had, and guess what? 7 of them are in place." And
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that I've seen that hurts the culture at a lot of restaurants, and I saw this because I remember working at a restaurant back in the 90s, a place called Beale Street Cafe here in Cincinnati area, Northern Kentucky. And the owner, Tommy, was an awesome table touch guy.
Mm-hmm.
Consumers loved him. He was a maniac behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I remember being a back, what is it? What was my official title? Barback.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody this story the other day. I'm like, because they know who he was. And I said, I had to get keys from him to get into the fridge because it was in a parking garage next to the restaurant. And that was the only place that the import beers were. And that he had a customer
Sure.
at the bar that wanted an import. We were at one
Sure.
bottle left. And I went to ask him for the keys and he just flipped out on me. Like I was stealing and selling them
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
And it was such a toxic culture because it was like, I got a Red Bull. It was like he probably hit it in his veins. And I think that's something that, maybe it's too far gone for a lot of people because it's, like they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But if you want to survive, especially
Mm-hmm.
with younger generations, when there's people out there that are much cooler bosses or much cooler places.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, the pandemic caused a lot of those toxic restaurants to never open again because the owners say, well, it's not worth it. I'm not going to bother anymore.
Yeah.
I'm too old. I don't want to start this all over from scratch. And that's what people are doing now. They really need to rethink what their business is and how they can make it a better place to work, make their product more exciting, make the ambience more exciting, all that stuff. But then the real goal here is to make money.
Yep.
And we have spent, well, my entire career working for restaurants, that had margins so thin that now if somebody blew their nose, half the profits would go away because the profits were only 2% or 10%. Any other industry, if you had a 10% profit, you close your doors.
Yep.
There's no reason for you to stay open. So a lot of that has to change now. And you've got a question coming up where I can answer that.
I've got it, because I think pricing is, I've seen other consultants say this before. I've got an event here at our headquarters here in a couple of weeks. It's like 5 days, on the 27th, and a guy named David Scott Peters is coming in. I don't know if you know David Scott Peters or not, but he's coming in to speak. And I've heard him say this before, and I agree. And I want to get your thought on pricing and things like that. But the restaurant business is one of the only models. Like, I used to be in the boat business, and we would buy a boat from Triton Bass Boats, and it would cost us $15,500, and it would cost us $3,000 to get it ready. So we knew we had 18.5 in it. We would mark it up 1.335, knowing we could discount 10-15% and sell it.
Right.
But I think a lot of restaurants, $10 burger.
Well, a lot of restaurants have really gotten into recipe costing, which is really what you need to do, because you need to know what your skeleton is, what your base is. But there's a lot of restaurants who, like you said, just put a number on the menu, and if it works, it works. If they've got money in the bank and they can pay their purveyors, well, then things are fine. It has to be more than that. I think there's a lot of people who never made restaurants a career is because they saw that as servers and as cooks. They saw how the owner had to struggle every week to make payroll or pay for the liquor or whatever. And that has to stop. I think, having a $20 burger on the menu today is going to be what everybody's going to have to do.
Yep.
Because there's no reason restaurants don't need to compete with quick service like McDonald's. Most restaurants need to compete with the kind of restaurant they have within their market. And that's where the pricing kind of gets dicey. I've got one friend who said, well, if my neighbor down the street raises his prices, I'll raise my prices. Well, you have two different businesses here.
Yep.
Now, he's operating one way, you're operating another way. The way you're operating, you're making some money, but if you raised your prices, you could make more money, you could pay your staff better. It would be a better culture for everybody. And the guest really kind of pays for it anyway, no matter where we go with this pricing. The guest knows why we're doing it, because they see prices going up in the grocery store. They see prices going up. They can't get things because we can't manufacture things either. We have problems getting some product. In the Midwest, there were a lot of chicken and pork plants that had to shut down because of the pandemic.
Yep.
Now they're just starting to ramp up again, but there's still not enough in the marketplace for everybody.
What's crazy to me is how businesses make decisions or analyze decisions based on somebody else. I told a friend of mine this one day. He called me up about just 3 or 4 months ago, and he was ranting and raving about a competitor. And this isn't in the restaurant business, different field. He's a friend and always calls me to cry on my shoulder. And I said, dude, I want you to picture you're going down the expressway, you're going 100 miles an hour, and you're in the middle lane. There's a lane to the left, lane to the right. I said, what happens when you watch the right lane or the left lane? You eventually go in those lanes. And if you go in those lanes, there's a car there, you crash. I said, mind your own damn business. Look in your lane and make decisions that make sense for your business, not based on theirs. And I go back to an example that I love to tell, because it's literally the example of people that don't pay attention. And at the end of the day, it doesn't affect is when we had the boat business, 1999, that's how I got my start in digital marketing. It was me and my dad and brother started a boat dealership. It was an online consignment boat dealership. And I read
that in the book, by the way. I did read the book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And so, got the dealership, and I'll never forget, we had our first couple months, we opened up and we had all the normal stuff. You had the doc fee, your document paperwork fee. And it was $49. It was $49 because that's what another dealership that my dad knew of.
Sure.
And so we did $49. Well, as we got to looking at it, as we got a year into it, I'm like, man, this is a lot more effort than $49. Like, we've got 3 hours to go to the courthouses. We got paperwork, we got these fees. So I'm like, oh, we can't raise it, man. People will flip out. I'm like, they're buying a $20,000 boat.
Yeah.
You think they really give a shit about $49? And so we raised it to $99. Well, long story short, every year after that, It went up 20 bucks, 40
Mhm.
bucks. Got to a point when we were done, when we were out of the business by late '08, our dock fee was $379. And at that point, it was a profit center because
Yeah, sure,
because when
sure.
I got to a point
Yeah,
when we got up to like 9 covered all of our costs. And it was like, okay, this handles
yeah,
everything. And we had done a lot more concierge stuff where we literally had said, okay, let's handle all these different warranties. Like a bass boat has a GPS and has this and has this. Let's take this because the consumers forget to do it.
sure.
So we
Yeah,
made it a better value. But the reason I
yeah,
say,
you were dealing in a smaller market.
yeah,
With restaurants, there are thousands of burgers out there
yep,
that people can compare,
yep,
and that makes it a little harder to raise prices. But still, you can do it. You can raise your price. You can be that outstanding restaurant in your neighborhood that not only has the best burgers, the best service, the best decor, but also the highest price for a burger. But the people come in because you're doing everything else better than anybody else
yep.
because you have the money to do it.
Well, and
When you
there's
don't
other
have the money to do it, you can't train.
and there's other aspects too. It's the people might pay attention to the burger price, but they don't look to see what a Michelob Light costs. They don't look to
Sure.
see what your Coke costs. You add jalapenos and bacon to your burger, it's 99 cents. I
Mhm.
think people are conscious. Like I went to breakfast this morning at First Watch, and it was $13.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's expensive or cheap. I traditionally don't look at the bill too crazy often. I'm going to eat. It's not like I'm not going to eat there because it's $1 more than it was a year ago.
Mhm.
But to me, that's the barrier. Like, okay, $13 next time I eat. If it's $15 or $10, who cares? But there's certain things in there that like they have their millionaire's bacon. It's a bacon I can't get anywhere else.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's delicious. Barley Corns down the street from my house has dock style buffalo wings. They're like double fried wings that nobody
Yeah.
else has.
Sure.
Like I don't even look at the menu price. It's my favorite wing.
Yeah. 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 And that's true. There's. I'm going to bring in another little issue in pricing here, and that's tipping or no tipping.
Yeah.
Tipping is something that is it's a very old way of getting staff the money that they need, and people like to tip, and then there are people that don't like to tip. I would love for our culture to adopt more of the European style of restaurant touring, so that there are no tips. You walk into a restaurant in Italy, and the pasta's €25. That's all you got to spend. You're not going to spend anything else. I was talking to a restaurant operator in Verona, Italy, about it, and he said, "Well, if I could lower my price and hope for tips, but it's going to come out of the guest's pocket anyway.
Yeah.
Whether I charge them or they give the tip to the server, it's coming out of the pocket of the guest, of the customer." Uh, I would love to have a no tipping arrangement in our country. It's going to be a long, a long road to hoe, but in the meantime, people are trying these service charges to raise, to get more money.
Yep.
I think that's stupid. Just forget about that. Just raise your price,
Oh yeah.
and then you can pay your staff more.
Yeah, I remember when I stayed at it was the Wynn Casino, I think. Is that the one with the giant it has a water fountain in front of it because Bellagio used to be
Oh,
the
sure,
Wynn,
sure.
but he went up and built the one. We went there, we stayed there. It used to have a Ferrari dealership in it. It was a really cool place.
Mhm.
And I get my bill and I wasn't too worried about it. I knew we were paying per night anyways, but it had like a $12 water surcharge. And I'm like, I'm not the moron that's got a 40-foot waterfall in front of the hotel. Like,
Yeah,
why are you charging me? I actually have seen restaurants that have surcharges. I think
yeah,
it's a dumb way to go. I don't
it is.
disagree that I think it'd be cool if we got rid of tipping, but I also know that, man, that's a big task because I've seen restaurants try it and consumers just don't get it. They don't understand it. They think there's something wrong and they still tip
Sure,
anyways, and it causes a problem.
sure.
But no,
Yeah, we need to find a way to educate our guests
yeah,
that they don't. If we get to a certain level of pricing, tipping isn't needed anymore at that point, so that they don't feel like they have to spend $20 on a burger.
X amount of profit margin. This is what my French fries have to cost. My onion rings.
Mhm.
That's a topic that, like, when we were in the boat business, we had certain items that had a 10% margin. We had certain items that had 400% margin.
Sure.
You have a 99-cent spark plug that you can sell for $5. I mean, you're going to go through it more often, and
Yeah.
restaurants need a price based on their circumstance and them being able to provide an outstanding product and service long term, not what Jimmy Joe down the street does.
Well, there's a lot of people don't know about the prime costs that restaurants need to have.
Yep.
Restaurateurs who have been operating for many years don't know what it is. Because if you can get your prime cost right, everything else kind of falls into place. you'll have enough money for anything you want to do. And that prime cost is the cost of goods sold plus your labor. Those are the two biggest controllables. And if you can get that in a range of 55 to 60% of your sales, everything else is going to be fine. You'll make the money that you want to make. You can bring more than 10% to the bottom line.
So prime costs,
prime
cost of goods, labor, 55 to 60%.
It's 55 to 60. That's the goal. Okay. And that's that working backwards. Okay. You start with that and then figure out how are you going to get there.
Yep. And there's something I call my business. I've read a lot of books about it, but it's the leading and lagging indicators. In my world, like a leading indicator is something that actually gets me where I want to go. That lagging indicator is, I'm going to go by this metric. Like a buddy of mine in the real estate business, I want to sell 20 houses this year. I'm like, well, that's a lagging indicator. It's how many houses you show, how many houses you list that gets you to that leading indicator. So last thing.
Yeah.
Restaurantlegends.com. Tell us about the podcast. Tell us how people can find it and tell us why they will love it.
Well, a couple of years ago, I started podcasting just for fun as a little hobby.
Yeah.
And then during the pandemic, that's when it really kicked into gear. I started talking about what restaurants were doing during the pandemic. And all along, this podcast has changed its name a few times. I started out with Legends of launching a restaurant, Legends and Lies of launching a restaurant,
okay.
And then just Legends and Lies, and now I'm down to just Restaurant Legends. But what I do is I just talk to people in the business who are the shakers, the guys who make it happen every day, ranging from some chefs all the way up to owners. I've got one on there that I did last month with Rich Melman from Let Us Entertain You. I've got a celebrity, Fabio Viviani. He was one of the top chef guys. Okay. He won, I think, twice. And then I've got guys who are just doing it every day. They're getting down in the trenches and then telling us how they're doing it. I don't get really into any details. It's really just a conversation between a couple of restaurant guys.
Cool.
If you were to sit down in a bar at midnight someplace, you'd probably hear the exact same conversation going on between the owner and the chef, or two owners or two chefs, because what we talk about is how we do it and why we do it and how much we love it or hate it or whatever, and how it got us to where we are in our life. My goal really for the Restaurant Legends is to help people decide if they want to make the restaurant business a career, okay, either through ownership or just through working there. It's for me, it's been great. I've been there now 50 years, but there's a way to make it a career and not just a way to get where you want to go. In LA, everybody who works at an LA restaurant has a screenplay, or they're trying out for different shows. Here in the Midwest, they're going to school, or they have to have money for the kids or whatever, but it's still not a career. And I think by showing everybody how these restaurant legends have become legends by doing what they do, that it can be a nice career, and they should think of it that way. And that's the way I think of restaurants. It was my career, and anybody who I've gotten involved with, if they haven't already made it their career, it becomes their career. It's just weird how the restaurant business just bites you in the ass and doesn't let go. Once you're there, you're probably not going anywhere. So.
And restaurantlegends.com is the way to find you. Now, yep. I'll ask the question, since you brought it up, and it happens to be sitting here in the studio. It always is. You mentioned the book. What were, put you on the spot. What is something you liked about it, or did it suck, or what were your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I got to know more about Matt Platt, which is good at the beginning part. But I think your clear directions on what you do, what you think marketing is,
yep.
It helped kind of solidify in my mind too, that there are some things that I hadn't even thought about. And I think everybody who picks that book up in the restaurant business will learn something. They may not learn everything. They may not have the answer to all their marketing problems, but you've gone through a lot of issues that I think people don't even know about. So
cool.
Good book.
Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you being on today. That's all we've got. Adios.
All right. Thank you.
Tobie.
Bye-bye.